Over the South China Sea at 2:30 p.m. local time, an American helicopter conducted operations that deeply concerned Beijing. In response, they deployed their premier attack helicopter to intercept. However, the Chinese aviator was unaware he was about to commit a career-destroying error during the following 72 minutes while attempting to intimidate Earth's most formidable navy. This aviator would inadvertently reveal intelligence Beijing desperately wanted concealed. Orders to essentially scare away the Americans had sent the Chinese Z-10 aviator scrambling from Xiamen 28 minutes prior. The U.S. Navy MH-60 Romeo, essentially the military helicopter equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, was actively monitoring a Chinese Type 039 diesel submarine. For 48 hours, the sub had remained underwater and was urgently attempting to recharge its batteries. Diesel submarines function like holding your breath beneath the surface. Sooner or later, you must surface for air. And America is there watching when you do. Foreign military aircraft. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course immediately. The Z-10 aviator's transmission broke through the radio as he executed a hard bank 500 meters across the Romeo's nose. One significant problem existed. Any Chinese territory lay 50 nautical miles distant in international airspace where America possessed complete legal authority to operate. The Romeo's three-person team, 2 aviators and a sensor operator, remained unfazed because they possessed knowledge Beijing lacked. China was about to commit an incredibly foolish act during the next 72 minutes while attempting to intimidate the US Navy. The Romeo wasn't merely observing, you see. Those protrusions and bulges across its fuselage, those are ALQ-210 electronic support measures pods. Consider them digital vacuum cleaners absorbing every electronic emission emanating from that Z-10. Radar frequencies, communication protocols, engine harmonics, everything received cataloging. The Chinese aviator believed he appeared intimidating, while the Z-10 you observe here represents what results when you purchase an Apache helicopter from Wish. Constructed with surplus Russian design help from the 1990s when Russia required money and China required helicopters. It appears intimidating with its angular construction, certainly, but a Toyota Camry with a body kit does too. 2 flares were fired around the Romeo by Beijing's aviator. This wasn't aggression, it was performance, the aviation version of a chihuahua barking at a pit bull. The American team's reaction? They aimed their dipping sonar straight at the submarine beneath. The communication was unmistakable. "We continue observing your companion down there." The submarine, understanding it remained tracked despite the aerial distraction, executed a panic crash dive. The noise it generated was tremendous. Cavitation from the emergency descent, hull popping from pressure variations. Sensors throughout the entire carrier strike group detected it. In submarine combat, noise signifies destruction. And Beijing's aviator had just sealed his own submarine's fate while attempting protection if the scenario had been actual warfare. But Beijing's aviator was about to learn something far worse. At 2:48 p.m., following 18 minutes of unsuccessful intimidation, the Chinese aviator finally believed he'd accomplished something. His fire control radar achieved a lock on the Romeo. The warbling tone through his headset indicated he could finally simulate an engagement. That confidence endured precisely 3 seconds. That's the duration required for Americans to cease laughing and activate a switch. What transpired next represented the electronic warfare equivalent of wielding a super soaker against Navy SEALs. A nearby EA-18 Growler began bombarding the Z-10 with electromagnetic energy via its ALQ-99 jamming pods. Abruptly, the Chinese aviator's radar resembled a TV screen without signal. His lock didn't merely vanish. The American helicopter seemed to multiply into 12 separate contacts. Some flew backwards, others seemingly teleported. One appeared within his own cockpit. This represents what occurs when 1990s Russian hand-me-down technology confronts modern American electronic warfare. The ALQ-99 doesn't simply jam radars, it induces hallucinations. Its frequency agile, jumping across the electromagnetic spectrum quicker than the Chinese radar can track. While Beijing's aviator searched one frequency, the jamming had already shifted to 50 others. But conditions deteriorated. What materialized on his threat display next produced goosebumps. The US Carrier Strike Group had just illuminated him with their spy radars. That's comparable to having Sauron's "I suddenly acknowledge your existence." FA-18 Super Hornets were already launching from the carrier deck. Not for engagement, but to remind Beijing this Romeo wasn't isolated. It possessed the entire US Pacific Fleet supporting it. The Chinese aviator attempted everything. Switching frequencies, boosting power, even cycling his radar off and on. Nothing succeeded. The Romeo's electronic warfare suite functions across multiple bands simultaneously, generating what specialists term the full-spectrum dominance experience, or what Chinese aviators call, "oh no." Meanwhile, the American team maintained such composure they were likely discussing lunch options. They understood in precisely 4 minutes the situation would become even more humiliating for China. The Romeo's aviator chose to transmit another message, a subtle bank to aim the dipping sonar at the submarine beneath. The submarine, still being monitored despite all aerial interference, now executed desperate evasion maneuvers. Each maneuver produced additional noise. Additional noise meant superior tracking. The Chinese aviator provided zero assistance. The US aircraft commander finally transmitted with the professionalism that accompanies absolute superiority. Chinese military aircraft. This is the United States Navy aircraft operating in international airspace in accordance with international law. We will maintain course and altitude. Translation: nice attempt, kid. Beijing failed to comprehend that every moment represented intelligence treasure. The volume of data being gathered was remarkable. Communication protocols indicating their encryption dated from 2003. Radar frequencies disclosing they hadn't upgraded since acquiring the Russian design. Even the rotor blade harmonics, valuable for identifying Z-10s from 50 miles distant purely by audio. But the Chinese aviator hadn't finished humiliating himself. He was about to discover why that represented precisely the incorrect action. The Z-10 had just entered what Americans term the find-out stage. Frustrated by his total electronic failure, Beijing's aviator closed to 500 meters, believing proximity would assist. At this proximity, he could observe the American door gunner operating the Gu-2150 caliber machine gun. Not aimed at him yet, but the communication was evident. Now the genuine mismatch became clear. The Chinese aviator initiated thumping, aggressive maneuvers intended to compel a defensive reaction. The Z-10 suddenly began lunging laterally, pitching vertically in sharp bursts, resembling a boxer throwing feints to provoke a reaction. Each action attempted to force the Romeo into an unfavorable firing position, but the tight turns destroyed its airspeed and stressed the Z-10's airframe to its G limit. The Romeo, constructed on the Black Hawk's validated airframe, can withstand considerably higher G-loads while sustaining stable flight. Beijing's aviator was essentially exhausting himself while the Americans observed. Meanwhile, the sensor warfare remained entirely one-sided. The Romeo's AAR-47 missile warning system monitored every aspect of the Z-10's motion. Maximum turn rate, 20 degrees per second. Climb performance, 12 meters per second. This intelligence would subsequently determine precisely how to program American missiles to intercept these helicopters. The Z-10 was supplying its own destruction manual. The Romeo's FLIR camera recorded everything in 1080p infrared. Every hot spot received cataloging. Exhaust ports at 450 degrees Celsius. Transmission housing at 180 degrees. These thermal signatures would inform American engineers precisely where heat-seeking missiles should target. The Chinese aviator was literally providing a guide on destroying his helicopter. And if he believed his own weapons could alter the balance, he faced another surprise. The Z-10's 23mm cannon possesses an effective range of perhaps 2,500 meters against ground targets. Against a maneuvering helicopter, fortunate to strike anything at 500 meters, the Romeo's Gu-21 has an effective range of nearly 2,000 meters with armor-piercing incendiary rounds that would penetrate the Z-10's cabin like tissue paper, which, given Chinese manufacturing standards, it essentially was. By this point, the Z-10's warning panel resembled a Christmas tree. The control inputs were becoming unresponsive. His helicopter appeared on the verge of literally disintegrating mid-flight. The Chinese aviator sensed the stick resisting him, but retreating meant court-martial. He silenced the warnings and pressed harder for one final maneuver. He attempted radar locks 14 times. Each attempt represented a gift to American electronic warfare experts. The Romeo systems recorded every frequency hop, every pulse pattern, every frantic attempt to penetrate jamming. It's like observing someone repeatedly trying incorrect passwords while you document each attempt. When Beijing's aviator attempted laser designation with his electro-optical system, the Romeo sensors didn't merely detect it. They identified the precise model and software version. This meant America now understood how to jam not only this helicopter, but every Chinese vehicle employing the same systems. One helicopter encounter just exposed an entire generation of Chinese weaponry. The stress became visible now. The Z-10's engines were operating at 105% maximum continuous power, producing an infrared bloom 40% more intense than normal operations. The Romeo's FLIR documented this in exquisite detail. Future American missiles would be programmed to recognize this precise thermal signature. When a Z-10 pushes hard, it literally illuminates itself for targeting. The electronic intelligence gathering was even more devastating. Every transmission between the aviator and ground control received interception. The frequency hopping pattern was foreseeable. American systems could now anticipate and jam Chinese military communications throughout the entire theater. As the encounter continued, the Z-10's performance visibly deteriorated. Hydraulic pressure declining from overheating, transmission temperature rising into the danger zone, flight controls becoming unresponsive from overtaxed servos. The helicopter was literally destroying itself through overexertion. At 3:42 p.m., the Chinese aviator observed the Romeos dipping sonar splash into the water once more. The submarine beneath remained tracked. Following 72 minutes, he hadn't displaced the Americans an inch. His thumb lingered over the transmit button to report his failure and concluded ground control already understood. They were observing the identical radar picture he was. The American team had gathered 72 minutes of intelligence treasure. Electronic warfare systems would understand precisely which frequencies to jam. Missiles would understand precisely where to target. Tactical computers would understand precisely how to outmaneuver it. This revelation delivers the message to China clearly. Stick to manufacturing knockoff iPhones. Bye for now.